Okay, so this video is a follow-up to a video I did years and years ago when I was testing and doing a comparison between the Audio Technica AT140, which is what I have here, and the previous one that I had, which was the AT120, which used to sit here. The difference now is that I've gotten rid of the 120 and I've put in its place an original Technics SL1200 Mark II, which I just recently purchased off of eBay. So this video right now is going to be a comparison between the AT140 and the SL1200 Mark II. There are going to be a couple things I'm going to need to do from a housekeeping perspective. One, I've got both dust covers on right now because I wanted to show this one's got a solid plain top, whereas this one's got the bubble around the gimbal on the tone arm. So an important thing to make a note of. I'm going to pause it here right now so that we can take off the dust covers permanently because that'll be a better shot, better video without the potential glare from those dust covers. So let's do that now. Resuming with our video, comparing the Technics SL1200 Mark II with the Audio Technica AT-LP140XP. I'll just refer to it as the 140 or the Audio Technica from this point forward, and I'll refer to this one as just the Technics or the 1200. Okay, so just some other housekeeping. Both of these put out phono level audio, and both have identical ATI phono preamps underneath the table there. So there's that's a neutralization and normalization for some of the testing that we're going to be continuing to do. Okay, so for this comparison, I'm going to be looking at features, then looks, then some ticky-tack stuff, and it's admittedly my ticky-tack stuff, then some core functionality, intangibles, and then cost. So from a features perspective, this one is mostly plastic. Pretty much top to bottom, and the mass that it has, because it does weigh a lot, the mass that it has is achieved with a steel plate that's glued into the bottom of the housing. This one is made, I'm pretty sure that this is aluminum, but it may not be, and I should have looked it up. I'm sure 1,000 people are going to correct me on this. I think it's aluminum, but it might be plastic. But it's a pretty heavy plastic, and then underneath is a very solid, dense rubber. The whole thing weighs a ton. It's only a little bit heavier than this, but like I said, this one's mass and weight is by virtue of that metal plate glued into the bottom of the structure here, whereas this one, it's just because all the material is super heavy, super solid. So the construction nod from that perspective, there's a solidness, built like a tank. You've probably heard that 1,000 times on the internet, but it's true, built like a tank. So it goes to the Technics, the 1200. From the looks perspective, in the original 140 to 120 video I shot, I said that anything that most closely resembles the 1200 is a winner in my book. So it's kind of unfair in this comparison because it's going to be kind of hard for anything other than a 1200 to look more like a 1200 than the 1200 itself. So just bias. Sorry. You don't like it, stop watching the video and move on. Okay. Here's some more substantial stuff. So ticky-tack. I don't like the reverse button on the 140. So we're just going to be doing ticky-tack on the 140. I don't like the reverse button. I do like the variable speed on the pitch control, where you can have it be base 8 plus or minus 8%, plus or minus 16%, or plus or minus 24%. I think that's a good feature. I don't like the power supplied rotary switch on this. The switch itself is inside of this the silver housing here, and you can only access the part to turn it on, but this little narrow, probably, I don't know, less than 90-degree spot of the switch to turn it on or off. Whereas with the 1200, the whole thing, the switch sits on the top and is not recessed like the 140. The switch sits on top of this housing, and you can grab it from all sides and easily turn it on and off, from there, which I think is kind of cool. Additionally, this one, a plus for the Audio Technica is that you can get up to 78 speed by hitting the 45 and 33 simultaneously. I think that's a pretty good bonus. On the 140, the tone arm lifter here, it's kind of cheap, and when you put it down fast on the record, this thing goes down like a rock. Boom. Whereas with the Technics, you have this hovering over the the record, and you let it down as fast as you can. It still slowly lets the needle down, lets the tone arm down very slow. So that's better. You're not going to damage your needle, and you're not going to damage your record, accidentally that way. Going back to the dust covers, I like the flat dust cover look of the 140. Never been a big fan of the bubble over the gimbal on the Technics. I think that's just silly, and I don't like that look. Also, on the 140, the feet are much larger in diameter than the feet of the Technics, and I think that's a better look, just for me personally. Going over to the Techniques, like I mentioned, don't like the bubble on the dust cover. I do like the minimalist feel, not a whole lot of fol-de-rol and extra buttons going on the surface here. I think that's a good look. The solid feel of the Q light. This one goes up, it's solid. Pushing it down, there's a lot of resistance, so you can't like just jam it down. This one on the 140 feels a little chintzy. I mean, it's loose, and it's just a snap down kind of a thing, not this like really substantial feel of the Q light on the Techniques. I already mentioned the solid feel of the arm lifting up the tone arm. That's definitely a plus for the Techniques. I do like its overall lower profile. It's a little bit lower, the body to the ground than this one. This rides high, and the dust cover sort of follows in that same theme, which is unfortunately one of the reasons why you need to have that bubble on it. But the lower profile, definitely a good look for the Techniques. And I not a big fan of the relatively smaller feet on the Techniques. So that's what it is. So let's move on to some core functionality. So when you're looking at these kinds of these two turntables, the audio coming out of each of them is completely untouched by anything electronic within the turntable itself. It goes straight from the stylus down the four wires to the gimbal, down to the gimbal, and then out to RCA. Same thing with the Techniques. There is no electronics that is having any impact, electronics on the inside of the case having any impact on that audio signal. So the most important components of this is going to be your stylus, your cartridge, right here. So really, and because those are swappable, you can't say that that component of the audio fidelity has anything to do with the turntable itself. So set that aside. However, there are three elements from my perspective that the turntables themselves have a huge amount of impact on. One is insulation from external noise. If you're shaking this or making any kind of vibration on this, how well do they absorb that external vibration? Second is the generation of internal noise, them making their own noise themselves. That is generally done by virtue of the motors and how quiet the motors are. And then the last thing is speed accuracy. How fast do they get up to the stated speed, and how solid are they on maintaining that speed? So let's take a look here at the Techniques. I'm sorry, at the Audio Technica. So the mass, like I mentioned before a number of times, and sort of it with a little derision, is the fact that the mass here is achieved by that steel plate that's glued into the bottom. From the motor noise perspective, there's virtually none. The motor here is really, really good, very, very quiet. There is no noise. It's non-existent. And from a speed perspective, it's solid, really is. It's, hits its mark and stays right on that. Looking at the Techniques, the mass is derived by, the whole thing being this cast aluminum and very dense rubber. So it's got a lot of mass, and by virtue of that, it repels a lot or almost all possible external noise, external vibration, so on and so forth. And this one does a pretty good job of that as well. Again, I just hate the fact that it achieves its mass through that metal plate, and I should stop harping on that because it is what it is. From the perspective of the generation of internal noise by virtue of the motor, this is silent. The two are really, really good, having totally quiet motors. The sound is non-existent, that's emanating from the motors themselves. From a speed accuracy, solid too. This has got really solid speed accuracy. One thing I will say though, with this one I have here in particular, there is a slight, almost unnoticeable, but I could notice it, slight overshoot on the speed as it's speeding up, from a dead stop. It overshoots a tiny bit and then comes back down and hits its mark and then holds that mark really well. But I did notice that. And then from an intangibles perspective, and I'm going to do a demo at the very end of this, comparing the silences, or not silences, comparing the sound and the silence starting up. But right now I'm just going to jump to intangibles. I bought this AT140 in 2020, so it's 5 or 6 years old. I bought this in 2026, so really like a month ago. But it was built between 1979 and 2010. That was the Mark II's production run. So let's split the difference and say this thing was built in 1995. It is 31 years old. I mean, that is incredible. This thing is 31 years old, and it's being compared to something that's 5 or 6 years old. That's pretty amazing. So also let's jump down to cost. So today you can get the 140 on Crutchfield for about $550, free shipping. For this one, the unit cost me $600 itself, and that was a good deal because this is in really good shape. There's not a lot of wear on it, not a lot of wear marks on it. It really is good. So $600 for the unit itself, $100 for shipping. I had to come from Japan. So that's where the shipping cost, the sort of extra shipping cost came from. On top of that, I had to buy, because it's a Japanese model, I had to buy a $75 power supply that puts out 100 volts instead of the 120, 110 that is the standard US voltage from the wall. I also had to add $50 for a head shell and stylus because it didn't have that. $50 is not going to get you the greatest stylus or cartridge. So know that I could have done better, but that's what this thing had on. And it sounds perfectly good, but that is not the world's greatest stylus or cartridge. On top of that, I had to replace the broken tone arm holder. This thing here had to be replaced because it was broken. And I had to get dust cover feet for the Technics, the two little black dust cover feet that sit here. So when the dust cover goes down, the dust cover itself doesn't touch the top of the surface here. You got your little feet doing that. And all in with all those, the shipping and all the thises and the that's that I had to buy, this was $845. So $845, call that $850 because the math is going to be rounder there. $850 to $550. This is, again, 31 years older-ish. 30 years older-ish, and it still costs me $300 more. So you do the math there. This is good. The 140 is a really good turntable. It really is. But it's still $300 cheaper than the flagship of this entire lineage of turntables, the 1200. So I'm going to put this on pause again so we can do a little sound test of these things starting up. Okay, I've got them all set up. They're not particularly queued up because I do want to let them have a little bit of runway on like the quiet area of the record so you can hear the startup sound. So let's start with the startup sound of the 140. Not bad. So that's definitely not bad. Let's do that for the Techniques. And these are both remote started. Not bad again. I think most of the noise that we're hearing from both of these, that was not good. That's a demerit for me. Both of these, as you can see, really quiet. The only sound you heard was maybe a little dust on the records themselves. Other than that, there was no motor noise. They both sounded really, really good. So anyway, that is my my summary, my review of comparing these two, the Technics 140. I'm sorry, the Audio Technica AT140 versus the Technics 1200 Mark II. So what's the final verdict on these both? I think the only way to actually have a final verdict is to say, all right, if you had neither and you could only have one, which would you buy? Which path would you go down? Which $550 versus $850 would you spend to get only one of them, if you could have only one of them? And for me, with all the pros and cons of each of them, and there are definitely pros to both of them. And again, first of all, this is splitting a total hair, and it really sort of comes down to things that aren't, are completely subjective, not objective at all, completely subjective. But at the end of the day, for me, I think I would go with the Technics. I think that because from a sonic quality, from an audio fidelity quality, it's the same. The extra $300 I can handle. So for that extra $300, I'm getting the turntable that as a kid I drooled over, and to be able to have that and I own it. It's a piece of history. It is the flagship of, like I said, of this entire lineage of turntables. It is the original. And to get all of that for an extra $300 is why I would pick it. If I could only have one or the other, if I can have both, I'll take both, and look at that, I have both. But if I could only have one for those reasons, for the fact that it is the original, I would go with the Technics 1200. All right, that's the video, and thanks for watching.